Welcome back to another edition of the Forts Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Inferno. We're at Forts Athletics. We equip coaches and athletes with the tools they seek out in order to achieve their unique and specific goals. And here we are, Tuesday late afternoon, March 1st, and we're leaving school, and I had another idea for a podcast, and it's so cool to have this capability to just record yourself, turn it into a YouTube video, podcast, and create some content for individuals. And what I want to share is an idea. There's something I've been thinking about, and it became manifested this afternoon after a conversation that I had with another thrower over the weekend. We were talking about opportunities and how to capitalize on opportunities when they're presented to us, and how to take advantage of these gifts that we are provided and offered, rather. And what we were talking about specifically was in track and field and throwing, of course, on how, we really can't control what our competitors are going to do at a meet. We can't control how well they're going to throw, how not well they're going to throw, what the conditions are going to be like. There's a lot of things that we can't control when we show up at a competition, but there's a lot of things that are within our direct control. Our thoughts, our emotions, our mindset, our preparation leading up to the meet, were all things that are either currently in that moment our control, or we did have control leading up to them, the meet prep, practice, etc. And what I found interesting, a lot of parallels with the conversation I had with this thrower, is there's a lot of parallels with Lewis's career at NAS, and Julia at Fredonia, and other throwers that I've coached in the past, but those two specifically because of their ability to perform well, one, when it mattered most, and the situation and context in which they performed well. So we'll start with Julia, since it happened first. 2009, Indoor Nationals. Julia ended up winning the weight throw, and she took advantage of an opportunity that was presented to her because there were a couple of other throwers seated ahead of her that did not have great performances that day. And Julia stepped up, set a personal best, and the weight throw ended up winning just over 60 feet. What strikes me about that is in the heart of the competition, we knew what was happening, or she knew what was happening, rather, and she was able to overcome, whatever was or whatever had stricken other throwers, right? And same thing with Lewis. However, his story is not about nationals. It's well prior to nationals. See, Lewis was a freshman. He's standing through the weight at indoor E8s in February, and was a 3-turn thrower and a hammer by the time we transitioned outdoors. And we were at the state meet, him, Brandon, and Jess, and they were competing in hammer and then shot put and discus, respectively, for Brandon, and Lewis just in the hammer. And what was interesting about that competition was that Lewis was throwing in the first flight, and he threw personal best, like 42 meters in the hammer. And we knew that he had to beat like 9 throwers in the first flight in order to make the finals. So personal best, school record, it was kind of a big deal. I was really fired up about that. So what ended up happening was he ended up making the finals, setting another personal best and finishing 8th, so scoring a point. Brandon, same thing in the shot put. A couple of athletes did not throw as well in flight 2. Brandon set a personal best in flight 1 and ended up qualifying for finals and scored a point. So 2 throwers who really shouldn't have been there to begin with ended up setting personal best when when it mattered most, and they took advantage of opportunities that were presented to them. The following year, Lewis, as a sophomore, were at the ECAC Championships at Albany, and drove out there. Let's see, it was a 6-hour drive about round trip to watch Lewis take 6 throws, which was well worth it. So Lewis, same thing, flight 1, set a personal best, and it was a little deeper competition. So he threw 50 meters, school record out of flight 1, made the finals, and moved up and scored, I think he finished like 6, so he scored a couple points, maybe 3 points, right, 6, 8, 6, yeah, something like that. Anyway, so leading up to these competitions, you practice as best as you can, right? You take advantage of those opportunities that are bestowed upon you. And when you show up for your meet, your competition, what I think sets these specific athletes apart is that they had a belief in themselves. They had a vision of where they wanted to go, and that belief helped propel them down that journey, right? That belief also helped them overcome any adversity or obstacles that they were going to encounter throughout the course of the season, in particular those specific meets. And I find that interesting because the thrower that I was talking to over the weekend said that they believed in themselves and that they trusted that regardless of what happened during the week, that they would be able to show up and perform well during the competition. And I said, that's great. I was like, how do you know that? And they said, well, I've thrown far in the past, and I know I can throw far when it counts and when it matters, and I'm going to be prepared. And I think that's really important for younger athletes out there, not so much track necessarily, but just younger athletes, that you control what you can control. And when opportunities are presented to you, take advantage of those opportunities. Compete to the best of your ability, and if the best of your ability allows you to sneak into the finals, basically that's awesome. And I can't say enough great things about when that happens at competitions, is people who take advantage of the opportunities that are bestowed upon them. That's it for this episode of Opportunities. This was the Forts Athletics Life and Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Inferno, and have a great day. All right, welcome back to part 2 of taking advantage of opportunities. That last episode kind of came to an abrupt halt. I'm going to try and keep these a little shorter. So here we are. So we were talking about opportunities and taking advantage of opportunities. And that doesn't just go for track and field. That's really any sport. Powerlifting, golf, tennis, swimming, diving. Most of those, they're more individualistic, team-centered sports, if that makes sense, right? So tennis, you have 6 or 8 athletes on a team, and your success, your team success is determined by how well the individuals compete on those days. Golf, it's an individual sport, much like track and field or triathlon for that matter, right? Which is something that I'm trying to dabble into, and it's really interesting because those opportunities, you know when they're going to happen, in track at least, if you keep track of, no pun intended there, if you are keeping score and you know what other people are doing and how far they are throwing, more oftentimes than not, any coach worth their salt will be able to encourage their athletes and say, hey, listen, this is where we stand in the competition, so how far you've thrown, you're going to comfortably make it in the finals. Or, okay, there's these people are within 5-10 centimeters, we need to amp it up a little bit here. Or, hey, you know what, you're in 12th, you've already set a personal best, you take 9 to the finals, we need to kind of amp it up a little bit on this final throw. But like I said, what separates those athletes is having a belief in themselves that they're able to overcome that type of adversity when it matters in that particular moment in their lives. Now, does it happen all the time? No, unfortunately not. But I think what makes that stand out more is that you're able to overcome and become able to overcome, which leads to greater resiliency. And what I mean by that is Lewis's sophomore season, won the E8 Indoor Weight Championship, and then we threw well at states, qualified for ECACs, and we threw in Boston. And Lewis had his, I don't want to say worst performance of the season at that meet, but he didn't break 16 meters. And we expected that was going to happen, that he was going to throw 16 meters and give himself at least a chance to qualify for finals. And after everything was said and done, he would have needed to throw like 25 centimeters farther than what he actually did in order to qualify for finals. So in that particular instance, it just didn't work out for whatever reason. Well, I know the background and the backstory, but anyway, so it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time. There's sometimes there's a defeat thrown in there, or sometimes there's situations that we are not able to overcome. But what allows those same individuals to continue moving forward is having a belief system, a trust in themselves, that innate, I don't want to say it factor, but just that little something that makes it difficult to pinpoint what exactly it is all the time, that allows them to overcome those obstacles. A lot of it has to do with meet preparation ahead of time. A lot of it has to do with mindset work, right? Visualizing those competitions, using imagery to see yourself performing well in competition, taking those mental reps on a consistent basis, feeling confident in yourself, thinking back to times when you did perform well in competition, what that felt like, what you were feeling, what the competition was like, what the circle felt like, all these different traits and characteristics that manifest themselves in helping you believe in yourself more and feel more confident in your abilities. The athletes that look at performance on a week-to-week basis, it kind of scares me a little bit. It's like a fine line when you're talking about performing well or hoping to perform well one week because you performed well the week before, if that makes sense. Where if you're able to bank these little wins, great practice on Monday, great practice on Tuesday, great practice on Wednesday, you start feeling more confident in your abilities because you're able to replicate good practices and good sessions over a long period of time, that when it comes to those major competitions, you're able to more intuitively throw, and you're able to more intuitively compete in the heat of the moment. And for some, where they have this unrealistic expectation sometimes, for some athletes they have an unrealistic expectation of expecting to throw far but not putting in the work leading up to the competition. That's just a recipe for disaster, unfortunately. And I've been on the other end of that competition also, and it's not pleasant for coach, it's not pleasant for athlete, because you sit back hopefully after and you kind of reflect on what's happened, and hopefully you have tracked and journaled or kept some sort of tabs on what led up to that competition, or what led up to that the performance that you weren't really too excited or stoked about. The first time I went to outdoor nationals with an athlete at Fredonia, we were seated like 12th. We didn't think that we needed the PR to make the finals based on everything that I've kind of like just talked about. And something happened the practice before, while we were in Iowa, that triggered something in my athlete that I just wasn't able to pull her back from. And she thought that she needed to put in more work, that she needed to on that specific day, and that just threw off rhythm, threw off balance. I think hurt her confidence a little bit, because she saw what these other athletes from other parts of the country were doing that we haven't competed against. So there is a little bit of that also. It happens sometimes, but the more you visualize and use mental imagery and journal and take care of those small wins that turn into bigger wins, hopefully it'll happen less than if you didn't participate in those like strategies and incorporate those strategies and traits and develop that skill set.